The reading task 1 in response to fiction poetry is in part 4 of the English Language and Literature course, following the learning outcome of themes and ethical stances or moral values of characters. The chosen text type is a poem inspired from Standing Female Nude by Carol Ann Duffy. This one will be written from the artist describing the poem, called George Brack. He will direct his disdain towards society, specifically museum owners and art collectors, so he is a marginalized person in his view. By this, reflecting Duffy's tendencies, even though I'm taking a man's point of view. This poem explores themes and moral values departed by Duffy, such as gender inequalities and marginalization. Even though the character in the actual poem is a woman, I wanted to take an opposite stance, changing roles with the artist, since his point of view was ignored. It's written from a first person point of view, which makes it more personal. The intended purpose of this poem was to develop a side of a story that wasn't seen, thus disclose to readers the ignored perspective of artists and how they're also marginalized and oppressed. This poem does not only take another stance, but we also explore the ugly truth of art. This poem uses an aggrieved tone to show George's indignation towards art and imparts how even though the prostitute is marginalized, he is marginalized to some extent as well. Some of the real choices I made regarding the conventions of Duffy's poems were to use internal dialogue, double entendre, metaphors, and some rhyme, since these are incorporated in her writing. This poem has 12 stanzas of 4 lines each, conforming to a text type in order to meet the objective, by following the exact format of a poem and addressing it accordingly. So for the rationale, my peers didn't give me a lot of feedback. They said it was fine. However, they told me here regarding the conventions of Duffy's poem when I talk about the authorial choices made that I was listing too much. So I basically erased some of the authorial choices that I had incorporated and only placed the most important ones or the ones that seem more relevant to Duffy's poems. Now, passing to my poem, I am a creator of ideas and my mind is key to all creations. When you glance at my work, you are catching a glimpse of my soul, for a part of me is in each piece I create. Here they didn't give me a lot of feedback, however they corrected grammatical errors. Then my main concern is volume, space, what will be presented to museums around towns, what will spectators see and criticize as they walk by, because art is giving everything and expecting nothing in return. People say anyone can use a paintbrush and some oil, that we painters, artists, are all the same. Our work isn't good enough, anyone can do it. Just try making great art with a river whore, I say. So here, the artist is alluding to the prostitutes that he uses to paint his paintings. And then questions coming at me like bullets aiming targets. Targets that aren't visible. That aren't visible because he's referring to the fact that every painter has their own ideas inside their minds and that these ideas are only visible to them and that each individual mind possesses them until the subjective one, meaning that one that is more open will come into play and connect deeply with the canvas made. So until there comes someone who thinks similarly or can understand art or understand that there are different viewpoints and they will understand it. Then I fracture a picture plane to explore varieties of viewpoints, viewpoints that aren't comprehended but simply left in oblivion, because most of the people see a painting and then they ignore it and then they forget it, when in reality it's a very important piece because painters put a lot of effort and time into each one of them. Then spectators think money comes easily, when in reality I invest and spend for more than a year working the same piece to sometimes get a no please dismiss from museum owners because art is giving and not getting in return. And on this part, my peers told me to remove this, but I think it's important because it's it's incorporating internal dialogue, and dismiss rhymes with peace, so I don't know if I will delete it. Then models are objects that will be fragmented into geometric forms, and even though they don't understand the nature of my doing, I wish I could immerse my brush inside their fragile bodies. So here he's using double entendre, and then ask them to stay as if they were absent, hearing from me far away as my voice doesn't reach them. They're not the main figure of the painting, only a part of it. I run the risk they go along, but never too long. So here it's a continuum of of the double entendre used here. Then, in this world full of critiques, painters are not taken seriously, but instead seen seriously. The world sleeps in disdain, meaning that the world is ignorant and doesn't know about art. And then here it alludes to how he is paid really little in comparison to what he spends on doing the painting. And here I changed a lot my wording due to my peers' feedback, but entirely my peers gave me feedback about grammatical errors, like they didn't mention anything explicitly. And my question was if my poem was reflecting an artist that was marginalized. But then throughout the poem, here in the end, you can see that he changes his mood and tone throughout in the end by saying that the only time that he feels good enough is when he has the art of being himself. So then he learns to deal with all of the critiques and problems that art may bring, and he learns to deal with it and understand what his real art is there for. So here I'm reflecting Duffy's tendencies because she, in most of her poems, depicts women as being weak at the beginning, and then in the end she turns them into being strong. So I was wondering if my poem was having a change throughout a poem of mood and tone, and if it depicts a marginalized artist, and yes.